Denis Villeneuve is a French-Canadian filmmaker who garnered notoriety after his film Incendies got nominated for an Oscar in the then called foreign language film category. Before that, he was on a 9-year-long hiatus because he wasn't happy with how his first 3 features, Cosmos, August 32nd on Earth, and Maelström, turned out. After a couple of shorts and a collaborative project with 11 other filmmakers called Happiness Bound, he returned to directing with Polytechnique in 2009, a film about the Montreal massacre that took place in 1998. After Incendies, he moved away from directing movies in French and entered Hollywood with a back-to-back Jake Gyllenhaal pairing in Prisoners and Enemy, had a double bill with female leads in Sicario and Arrival, and then moved further down the rabbit hole of adaptations by tackling a sequel to Blade Runner 35 years after the original's release. Catching up to present day now, he's on the second of, hopefully, 3 Dune movies, with Dune 2 out in theaters now. We already can't wait for Dune Messiah to lead us to the promised land. I'm Ewan, and I'm joined by Lachlan and our producer, Kevin, who will serve as our tiebreaker in the single elimination movie bracket set to determine the best Villeneuve movie, in our opinion, of course. Here's an overview of the whole bracket, which consists 10 movies that are competing for it. We've left out his short films and his first 2 films, Cosmos and August 32nd on Earth, as we couldn't find a subtitled version for it, and unfortunately, Lachlan and I both don't speak French well enough to watch the original version of that. Seating is determined by the average Letterboxd rating, which has Dune 2 as the highest and Maelström as the lowest seed. We're starting off with 2 play-in rounds for the titles ranked 7 through 10, as the top 6 are already in a fixed, secured spot for this bracket. So without further ado, welcome to the both of you, and we'll kick it straight off. Without any further ado, with our first play-in round between Polytechnique and Enemy. So Lachlan, you just finished Polytechnique before we started recording today, and then watched Enemy for the first time as well in the last week. So which of those 2 do you prefer?
That is right. I did watch both Polytechnique, Enemy, and Maelström for the first time. Those are the 3 Villeneuve films that I just haven't had time to sit down and watch. They have been in my blind spot for him. I have to say, this might be the hardest bracket we've done. The most recent bracket we did was Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott has his highs and he has his lows, but his lows are quite low and his highs are quite high, where Villeneuve has one of the most consistently strong filmographies that I have seen in a currently still alive filmmaker. But to get to the first round, Polytechnique versus Enemy. Both have their strong suits, both have their weaknesses. I'll get to sort of Villeneuve's evolving filmography when we get to Maelström very shortly, but Polytechnique is extremely confronting and it's extremely well executed. It's not too complex. You can definitely see him evolve in Enemy into being a bit more of a complex movie with its themes and storytelling ideas. I really, really, really enjoyed Enemy, and I felt that it was really interesting to see this sort of 2-character Jake Gyllenhaal, which was a lot of fun. But I found the confronting nature of Polytechnique quite exciting, and it reminded me quite a bit of another film, Elephant by Gus Van Sant, and that is a fantastic film, again, quite controversial at the time of the Columbine shooting. Polytechnique does go down a similar route of being quite in your face about it, which is why my vote is going to go to Polytechnique.
Oh, that's interesting, because Kev, you're gonna come in soon already in the first round, because Polytechnique, I didn't rate it because I struggle to find, I don't know, words to describe what I like about a film that is about a shooting, because I feel like inherently it is always exploitative. You can never make a film dramatizing a project, honoring the victims. It doesn't matter your intentions. Ultimately, you're highlighting an atrocity in a way that is like, it's such a complex thing of what's the justification for it, for this sort of art, because it's inherently always motivated by getting this kind of publicity for people who end up doing this, no matter their intentions. Maybe it wasn't to be like infamous as this guy who killed a bunch of people. That wasn't his intention. So I don't, it's like, it's such a complex thing for me that I struggle to really get swept up in it. I like the filmmaking in it. I think it's pretty capable, but Enemy has I also watched it for the first time, same as you, Lachlan, and I just had so many questions after it, and I kept like thinking about it. I really like the ending. That I guess I don't want to spoil for people maybe who haven't seen it yet, but I'm gonna go with Enemy here over Polytechnique. So Kev, you're the tiebreaker.
I'm the tiebreaker.
Which one would you?
Well,
I already
Yeah.
know what Kev's gonna pick as well.
the thing is, right?
Is it? I don't know.
I haven't seen Polytechnique.
No, I do. He hasn't seen Polytechnique.
Okay.
So,
It's a
but,
default for
but,
Enemy, I guess.
but because the Polytechnique is about an atrocity, and my intro probably wouldn't get picked, which in itself is an atrocity, I'm gonna vote for Polytechnique.
So out of touch. It's in bad taste, but hey, we'll run with it. You're
Look, I'm
making
not sure
yourself
if it's
the
gonna
enemy
survive
here, okay?
further rounds, but
So we got the second play-in round, which surprisingly, Dune is his number 7th by ratings-wise on Letterboxd, and I was a bit surprised. I guess it just speaks to how strong his filmography is overall, that Dune has to go into a play-in round. There was also, like, I guess talked as it's like a half-finished movie. Is the legacy of the first Dune film now going to be different? The second one is out, but we'll get into that in a sec. Maelström is what it's going up against. Lachlan, this is early on in his filmography. The film that he did, and then he quit filmmaking for 9 years. Do you think it's still one of his better ones? I guess I can already kind of, like, knowing how much you love Dune, I would be really surprised if you pick it over if you pick Maelström over Dune. But yeah, what do you think of Maelström?
well, being my first watch, I was quite excited for it because I've heard so many mixed things. And
Yeah.
I kind of understand where Maelström sits. It's funny because I would say, as a French-Canadian filmmaker, it's his most French film out of all of them. In terms of
A
storytelling,
lot of nudity.
wackiness, nudity.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun for that reason, but I also found it quite messy in its storytelling. Even though he has tackled quite complex narratives before and has sort of played with weird timeline aspects that are more complicated than Maelström does seem to fall flat, and I can understand why he would kind of give up if it wasn't received that positively. So Maelström unfortunately has that for it. Dune also has the same sort of idea where it's a half-finished film because it's setting up a sequel that wasn't even greenlit when it was finished. But
Yeah.
the thing is, without Dune, Dune 2 wouldn't exist because Dune had to walk for Dune 2 to fly. And
Wait,
I find
I
that
think this is a real chicken and the egg kind of question, Lachlan. Which
What
one
came
came first? Dune 1 or Dune 2? I was like, I just don't know.
they're gonna kind of be like one in a moment, similar to how we kind
Yeah.
of talk about the original prequels and sequels as being those sort of 3 films. Dune is going to probably be considered as Dune 1, Part 2, and then Messiah when it comes out as sort of the one film, similar to how most people refer to as Lord of the Rings, as Lord of the Rings, Fellowship, Two Towers, Return. Like, they all often refer to it as that. But Dune is better with its storytelling, even though it is slower. It is better in scope, better in scale, better in cinematography. The sound design is absolutely fantastic, and the score is one of the best ones I've had in recent memory with Hans Zimmer. So, my vote is shockingly going to Dune.
Who'd have thought? I'm also
Who would've
going
thought?
with Dune. I think Maelström has, like, it's just a weird narrative framing from this fish who keeps getting beheaded. And
With the
I think
greatest accent of all time. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. I think it has too many ideas. I think it's like a filmmaker who has so much to offer that we can see in like the humanity that he brings out of, like, the edge of humanity that people go to with I guess Dune Part 2, where he almost does like these obsessions with religion and the like fanaticism that he can adapt. I think he really shines when he gets to adapt something, because when we look at his filmography, a lot of stuff is adapted. Incendies, Dune, I don't know about Prisoners, but Arrival is based on a short story. And yeah, he's doing great in that sort of ballpark. I think Maelström is still kind of worth checking out in his filmography. It's an interesting film. It's certainly like, if you look at filmmakers that have like a really high quality ceiling for, or like average as well for the work, I think Nolan is also amongst them. And his early work feels more like concept pieces that work really well, like with his short films. Is thinking of Doodlebug, I think. But with Maelström, you already have someone where you can see, oh, if this guy has just more access and a bit more time with his craft, I think he can actually do something great. So. Yeah, Maelström worth checking out, but Dune moves on into the actual final 8 of our bracket.
Also, without these latest 2 movies, we wouldn't be doing this bracket.
All right, moving on. Dune Part 2 is going up against the winner of the play-in round 1, Polytechnique. I didn't vote for it the first time, so I'm gonna keep it brief. We already talked about Polytechnique. My vote goes clearly to Dune Part 2.
Wow.
Lachlan, your answer.
It's just stalling. Like that time mark when you're watching like this video for this round is gonna be really short, and Lachlan is just trying to stretch it out.
You think that I'm gonna vote for Dune too? But have you seen my rating for Polytechnique?
No, I actually haven't.
I think it's 6 stars.
6.
Go to Letterboxd right now, Ewan. Go to Letterboxd right now.
Assault rifle. Polytechnique. 4 stars.
And what was my rating for Dune Part 2?
4.5.
Exactly. So that's why it's going to Dune Part 2. 4.5 stars. Polytechnique got 4. You've heard my rating for Polytechnique. Go listen to the review of Dune Part 2. You'll hear me rave about it. So yeah, it's going to Dune Part 2. Had to extend it somehow. I just couldn't have mindless silence for 5 minutes. I had to kind of prompt you guys to get engaged and, extend it.
I'm always engaged with you, Lachlan.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You guys, break it off. Divorce, please. All right, next round. Lachlan, this one is one of your favorites. Blade Runner 2049 is going up against Arrival. I think you have something on your wall, actually, where... Is it Blade Runner 2049 where you have every single frame of it in this, like, spec of it? Is that... Yeah, so you've long had that film as one of your favorites of all time. You moved from Morbius camp. Equally great films. Lachlan, linguistics, is that your métier? Do you like Arrival for that? Can Jeremy Renner and what's her name? Why am I blanking on her name?
Amy Adams.
Redhead. Amy Adams.
Oh, nice.
Can she pull an upset here? Can she pull an upset here with Blade Runner, or do you stick with one of your all-time favorites?
So, for me, Arrival has always been my least favorite Villeneuve film. I have always enjoyed it the least amount when I watched it for the first time. This is obviously going back a few years. Because my first Villeneuve film I was introduced to was Blade Runner 2049. And then from there, I went on a deep dive of his filmography and I was quite entertained. But Arrival on my first viewing just didn't do anything for me. But recently rewatched it for the first time after a while. And I must say, I enjoyed it a lot more. I enjoyed the performances. I enjoyed the subtlety of the performances. I enjoyed the narrative where it went. I just didn't like how at the end they tack on this little thing and it's multi-timeline you didn't realize. And for me, that still stands. I wish there was more of that throughout, but maybe he just didn't want to tackle that through the entire runtime and just throw it on the end there, so that idea does feel half-baked. But I really enjoy the slow reveal. I enjoy the copy of the enemy shot with the alien with Amy Adams in the room. I enjoy those little tiny things that kind of reference others, but for me, Blade Runner 2049 has so many positives to it that I love. The first one that I'm going to give is going to be, it's a perfect sequel made X amount of years later to an original, and you don't really get many of those. So for me, the strength of Blade Runner 2049 topples whatever strengths Arrival has. So for me, it's going to 2049.
For me, it's also a clear path straight to 2049. I do think Arrival it's based on the short story that also ends in that multi-timeline thing. So it's not like something that Villeneuve invented. It's also like it's like a short story. It's about I think 30 pages long or something like that. And I read it with my most recent watch of it a couple of years back, when I did it in an English class at university, and it added a lot to it. And then it also has kind of grown this cult following of like, hey, this is an underappreciated Villeneuve film. I don't think it holds the candle to 2049, because 2049 gets to do so much really great sci-fi stuff, and it has the Ryan Gosling performance, I'd say. I know a lot of people really love La La Land. They loved him in the quirky style of Ken. I think this is still like probably his best. I mean, Drive is really good as well. I really like him as this not really talkative guy who has a lot of hurt in there. And yeah, it's just a great aesthetic. It's a great story. It's a ton of fun. Also going with Blade Runner 2049.
He does so many interesting sci-fi elements in 2049, which is a lot harder into the sci-fi in terms of the visual look and the visual style. Arrival is less of that. There's really only the one thing that's sci-fi, and that's obviously the aliens themselves and the pods. But inherently, Dune, whilst it is a sci-fi, it doesn't really have that many sci-fi elements other than just being on another planet. Like the world of
fantasy,
Dune, there's no computers, right? So there's no computers in the world of Dune, so there's less sci-fi. I'm not saying computers are the only sci-fi thing, but like it's you are correct. It's more fantasy style
but did you know
than
that
it is sci-fi.
Science is only magic that we understand. Like,
Yeah, beautiful. But I wonder if like he struggles with subtle with subtle sci-fi. I wonder if he's more of like a grand scale sci-fi, and Dune is like his perfect mix of, it's not sci-fi, it's almost fantasy set in a different planet.
Well, he did say that he struggled the most with Blade Runner 2049 in a recent interview. I think he said that was his hardest work, and he would never go back to it, which is interesting.
I don't think he said it is hard. I think he said like that he was in disbelief of why he took on the challenge to make a sequel to Blade Runner, which I still think like all you Villeneuve, I think you're a fucking idiot for saying like you kind of regret it, bro. You made a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah.
Have both of you seen Arrival in theaters?
No, I've never seen it in
wow,
theaters,
am I the only one?
It's just okay.
Yeah, bro. But have you seen Morbius?
As a 16-year-old, I wrote some reviews. I was a fucking idiot, alright? As 16-year-old, I gave Olympus Has Fallen a 10 out of 10 as a kid. So like I was a fucking idiot, right? But little 16-year-old Kevin cooked when he put Arrival on his top 3 of 2016, and that wouldn't be any different in today, but I still have to give it to Blade Runner 2049. Yeah, I'm sorry, but Arrival.
I unfortunately don't have a shame kink, Kev, so I'm gonna cut you short so we can move on. We haven't seen it in theaters, okay? I'm sorry. It's just like I wasn't watching it. I think I was even abroad when it came out, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We got some other stuff to get to because Dune is back in another round. And it's going up against, apart from Dune Part 2, his highest rated film that he currently has, with Incendies, which got him an Oscar nomination for the best foreign language film. It currently sits on spot number 54 on Letterboxd with a 4.4 rating. Yeah, Lachlan, did you love it as much as everyone else seems?
It's a little bit funny because I love Dune, right? I love Dune. But the point of these brackets is that we kind of forget the rest of his filmography, which means I have to forget that Dune 2 exists when I'm versing Dune. And also, how do you pronounce this film?
Incendies. What the fuck, Ewan?
Incendies? So, Incendies is not what I should be saying, which is how I've been saying it for the past like X amount of years.
Incendies.
Incendies. Got it. Cool. Sick. Now, I've been butchering the name for many years now, but let me just say this. Incendies, when I watched it, which was the name of the title when I watched it, is absolutely fantastic of a film.
Yeah.
Narratively, structurally, it is one of the most emotionally draining films I've watched out of his entire filmography, I think that he has some fantastic characters in his filmography. But there has not been a character I have been as emotionally attached to in his filmography, other than in what's the name of the title?
Incendies.
Thank you. So, for me, if I am going to compare Incendies and Dune, two films where one is narratively dense and emotional, and one is a spectacle, I must kind of admit that narrative and emotion is the main reason we make this art form. Not just for the sheer spectacle, and as much as a good picture looks, I'm gonna vote, shockingly, for, lads, one more time, can you translate it for me?
Incendies.
Incendies.
Wow. Okay, that's actually surprising. I was, because I think you had Dune at one point at a 5-star. I don't know if that changed.
Dune is at a 5-star. Incendies is a 4-star for me. However, I include Dune and Dune Part 2 in that. So it's almost like one film. For me,
fair, yep.
It's a strong 4. But if I combine, like, until Dune Part 2 has, like, got a 5-star, I am going to say that Dune by itself, the first one, on Sunday is a better film.
Dune is, by all means, a fair assessment after it came out in 2021, an incomplete story. It's not done. Incendies closes its story, probably, maybe in the best way that Villeneuve. And that's crazy for Villeneuve because he has a lot of like really good endings. I like Prisoners that we're about to talk has a really great ending. Enemy as well, like some thought-provoking stuff. But Incendies packs the biggest punch, and it without spoiling it here, because I feel like once you've seen it, you are going about watching the film very differently. I definitely want to rewatch the film because I feel like there's a lot of stuff set up similar to like when you watch Prisoners again. I think it has such a prolonged kind of tension building that it even delivers some of its gut punchiest moments and maybe even twists in a way, or like story revelations kind of through the characters first before you as an audience member realize it. And that really puts to the forefront how much he as a filmmaker loves to do show, don't tell. That he doesn't want to tell us directly what a character is thinking. And there's like one scene in this film that is absolutely mesmerizing. And I was watching it on digital, right? So I wasn't in the theater. I could pause it. And I had to pause and rewind it. It's like, did I miss something? And I think like I was through the first like hour, I was thinking, okay, what does the story build to that everyone is so like set on, hey, this is like his most underrated and probably his maybe even his best film. And I'm like, okay, by the end of it, I understand where you guys are coming from. So I'm also picking Incendies over Dune.
Once again, I'm useless. Next round.
Incendies, I'm sorry.
You might be useless, but you're loved.
Oh.
Our next round, maybe we have a different opinion here, Kevin, and you get to have another vote after the first round.
Here we go.
Prisoners against Sicario. Now, as someone who really loves thrillers and abducting little children, and Lachlan, who really loves action movies. Lachlan, where do you land with like these action versus thriller debate? What do you connect more? I guess Sicario is also a thriller.
Of course you start with me, you motherfucker. Okay, so, you know how previously I just, like, literally, like, 2 minutes ago, I just said that Villeneuve has got some really fun characters, right?
Oh, yeah.
Prisoners and Sicario have some of my favorite characters in his entire filmography. Forget Paul Atreides in the first Dune. In the second Dune, he's way more interesting. In Sicario, you have Alessandro, which is absolutely incredible as a character. He says nothing, but he says the most amount of any character in the entire film. You have Kate, played by Emily Blunt, which is also one of the most engaging performances of her career, at least in my opinion, other than Edge of Tomorrow, which was so much fun. That's the fun one I was thinking of. You then have Prisoners, which has, and I will say this, Hugh Jackman's best performance until Deadpool 3. No, I'm just kidding. It is his best performance in any film. I don't care what you say about The Fountain. I don't care what you say about, what's the musical one?
Greatest Showman.
Right? Greatest Showman, that too.
I guess
Hugh Jackman's best performance is in Prisoners as Keller. You also have Jake Gyllenhaal's Detective Loki in Prisoners, which is also my favorite pairing of two characters who are polar opposites doing two separate things to get to the same goal and going against some of their core beliefs or staying with their beliefs, which is one of my favorite elements of Prisoners, is watching Hugh Jackman's killer go against, you know, his faith and becoming less of a human, and watching Detective Loki follow the procedure of the law and getting to the inevitable goal. Sicario hits some really hardcore themes, and I feel like Prisoners has its moments where it's hardcore and in your face, but Sicario is much harsher, and it shows this world that, you know, you don't really experience. So I feel like the tension is quite high in both, but the tension is better in Sicario. But I find narratively in Prisoners, the story evolves more naturally, and I enjoy the mystery a lot more than the mystery of what's going on in Sicario. So for me, whilst both I think are fantastic films, and this one was extremely difficult for me to do, whilst Emily Blunt's Kate and Benicio del Toro's Alessandro are spectacular, it does not beat Hugh Jackman, it does not beat Jake Gyllenhaal, and it does not beat Paul Dano in Prisoners, which is why my vote's going to Prisoners.
All right, vote's going to Prisoners. I do think in both of these films, they do have shared the similarities that they're not like wholly unique sci-fi worlds that he invents. We are in a familiar space of both are like crime-focused. Crime thrillers, one about drugs, the other one about kidnapping. And it's not like we haven't seen anything like this before by other filmmakers, and it's also like thrilling. But he just adds something really unique to both of them. I have to say, it's the only film I didn't have time to fully rewatch was Sicario. And I think I last watched it like 6 or 7 years ago. I might have even only seen it in theaters, if I remember correctly. And I only had time to like look into it a bit. I'm a fan of a lot of people who are in it. I think it's a fun story overall. It's thrilling with a bunch of reveals and who's actually on whose side and stuff like that. And he likes to tackle in his stories, like when he gets to do them in Dune as well, like that underlying question of we are on the set path for a character, but is it actually the path that it's best for him, but also for the people around him? And it feels similar in that way with Sicario with certain characters. But Prisoners, my God, I rewatched it last night because I started up Sicario and then I quit and was like, no, I don't have time for Sicario. I do want to rewatch Prisoners though. Watched it all, didn't pause it at one moment, and I wrote down in my review that this might be the most stressful movie I've ever watched, and I've seen Uncut Gems 3 times. It's so thrilling, you're so on the edge of your seat the whole time, and I know it has certain revelations that are a bit over the top for the human story that it could tell underneath it, but that's just like on top of it. You don't really dive deep into, I guess, what the repercussions are for what this does to the characters. It's more in the what are they doing in the moment. But that part is so thrilling, and I don't know if I've ever seen it done better. So I'm gonna also go with Prisoners. Let's move on to the semifinals, which is, oh my God, I don't even know if I have a pick here, which is going to be between Dune Part 2 and another sequel, a little one called Blade Runner 2049.
I do have a choice that I think is clear.
Oh shit.
For me.
Okay.
This is the round of the sequels. One crafted by a filmmaker 30, almost 40 years ago now. Actually, no, 40 years ago now. Made by, then a sequel with Denis Villeneuve. And an original that came out only 3 years ago by Denis, and then came out with a sequel a few years later. So we are battling whether or not Denis Villeneuve is a sequel king. And might I say, his track record so far means I would like to hand this man a sequel to any film, because these are both spectacular films in their right domain, and they are both fantastic pieces of sci-fi. But right now, as we record this on a Sunday evening, 10th of March for me, Dune 3 has not been released, which means we are currently sitting in the time between The Two Towers and Return of the King. which means we are not fully looking at the scope of what Dune will be. But this is a bracket after all, isn't that right, blokes? Why did I just say blokes? It's a terrible way of saying it. But
British.
Alright, mate. Good day, mate.
But this is not a testament of what Dune will be when it's out. This is a bracket, right? This is a bracket, so we must look at both of the films individually of their strengths and their weaknesses and decide whether or not that film is better than another, and it does not depend on the original Dune or the original Blade Runner. As a sequel, they both succeed in continuing the story set by the original, one more just straight away than the other, but one does evolve into telling a more complex story, but also has its high points and its low points and shows them really well. Dune Part 2, in my opinion, as someone who's only seen it once right now, its high points and low points do not reach the same extremities that Blade Runner 2049 does. I find that Blade Runner 2049's highlights, even though there's no action, its high points and its low points are both done in great care. With that, the cinematography of Roger Deakins outperforms the cinematography of the Australian bloke whose name is not coming to me right now.
Greg
Fraser, who is a spectacular cinematographer, but I find that the complexity of the colours and the landscapes that Blade Runner 2049 does is better than the barren landscapes of the desert that Dune has. Not saying that Dune isn't pretty, but I find that Dune 1 is better than better than Dune 2. Blade Runner 2049 is the better film and the better sequel than Dune Part 2.
You're bringing in the Roger Deakins pick. I'm inclined to just, get Kev to talk and picking Dune 2, but I think I can't. I think I'm going with Blade Runner 2049 as well. I'm keeping it short because I guess it means that it will move on into the next round, and we'll talk about it a bit more in the next round.
I'd love to hear Kev's pick. I want to know whether he's going to go Dune 2 or Blade Runner.
He's also the only one who's actually seen it in true IMAX in the 1:3:1 aspect ratio. I unfortunately saw it in IMAX in 1:19.
Yo, if you want to rant,
sucks.
go on. I'd love to see you rant.
No, I'm not gonna rant. I did it when I realized, because I was mad. I was pretty mad. I feel like I'm still missing out on Dune Part 2. And I don't feel the same way about Blade Runner 2049. I feel like watching it at home, watching it in the theater, I remember my mom always raving about Blade Runner being like this great film, and I'm like, yeah, I'll watch it at some point. And then I shortly watched it before 2049 came out in theaters in 2017. And I went to a midnight screening of it because I was so, like a double bill, because I was so excited for this film. I ended up falling asleep during it, which was, I guess, maybe not the best choice to go see a movie at 1 a.m. in the morning. But I quickly went to theaters again and saw it again. And I think it's incredible. I think it's held up on its own, that it's not like so reliant on being the stepping stone in this larger story. And I agree with you, Lachlan. Maybe in 4 years' time, when Dune Messiah comes out and we have hopefully a more completed thing to the story, then ultimately it's easier to say Dune 2 was actually like this great stepping stone in this whole saga. At this moment in time, like you said, on March 10th, on the evening of the Oscars, I'm gonna go with 2049 over Dune Part 2. But Kev, what about you? Would you choose Dune 2, or where do you land?
Yeah, nah, I'm going Blade Runner 2049 as well over Dune Part 2.
Thought so.
And
the sweep.
Yeah, sure, it's a sweep, but it's a sweep against Dune Part 2. Like, we literally had to kill a darling here.
Our first finalist. Our second semi-final is between Incendies and Prisoners.
I'll make this one simple because we're probably going to get a little bit complicated in the next round. Incendies. Sorry.
Oh, that's
not Incendies.
Incendies.
Someone stop me. Incendies and Prisoners are both spectacular films, and they're both right. I have watched one once. I have watched one at least 3, maybe 4 times. One I find quite dense and moving and emotionally engaging. The other one, I enjoy the mystery. I watched Prisoners just after finishing the first season of True Detective. which means I was in the right mindset to watch Prisoners because they share some very similar elements in its mystery. For me, the better film of these two is the one that engages with me the most. When I watched Incendies, it was engaging, it was fun, but every time I've watched Prisoners, I have stopped whatever I was doing on the side and I have sat down and watched it, which is why my vote is going to go to Prisoners.
Damn, okay. I'm really happy about our final 4 here, because looking at my ranked list of Villeneuve right now, these are actually my top 4. And I do have to say that at this very moment, I do have well, actually, this would be a spoiler for the next round, so I'm not giving it away just yet. Hold on 1 second. I was almost gonna spoil the rest of this video. But I do have them next to each other or like close by. They pretty much all share similar ratings. On my rewatch last night, Prisoners was the one that moved up for me, and it was already at a 4.5 star. And it did go up to 5. I think it is probably one of the best thrillers that we've ever gotten. And I can't deny it. Maybe on a rewatch, feel similar to it than you do, Lachlan. Because I've only seen it once, maybe repeated viewings will add even more depth to it, similar to how I feel about it with Prisoners. And just like highlights the performances even more. But there's so many like standout moments in Prisoners and the choices that I really like, that I gotta go with Prisoners as well over Incendies. So we do have our finals. It's between Prisoners and Blade Runner 2049. Looking at the bracket and the seeding, this was expected. I'm really happy because previously, by reasons of me not being the greatest at arguing in 30-second chunks, I've lost out on some mashups, and it ended up costing me my favorites dropping out of the race early. But I do have 2 of my top 3 films in here. Lachlan, I'm gonna hand it off to you again because I don't want to go first in any of these.
So you've got 2 films here that have a very similar runtime. One of them is, again, I've probably said this a couple of times, denser than the other film. The other one uses its time fairly sparingly. And whilst there are moments in Prisoners that are slower, and they typically involve characters, there's a lot of moments in Blade Runner that just are of the world, right? The opening montage of shots with like the solar array and the eye. There's not really much going on there other than just setting the tone, setting the mood. In Prisoners, we get those moments through the character's development. We watch Hugh Jackman devolve his moral high horse into this creature of fear, and will go to any extremes to, find his daughter. Kay follows a journey of, similar to Loki, of we gotta find this child, and slowly devolves into thinking he is that child, into then protecting that child and protecting the idea of it, joining the idea of, that rebellion. For me, Prisoners ends up being quite engaging, a little bit more than Blade Runner, but there is one film out of these 2 that I've actually watched without audio. Just watched it. Didn't even need audio. I just sat there and watched Blade Runner 2049 without any audio just to watch it. And I can tell you what, it was a lot of fun. With Prisoners, there's a lot more dialogue, there's a lot more going on that's more complex, and if we have to be as faithful to Villeneuve, who would love to not have dialogue in his movies, well, there's one movie that I've watched where I didn't have the dialogue, I didn't have any audio, which is Blade Runner 2049. So,
which, by the way, to be noted
means...
here, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you're taking.
Go ahead.
Mid-run.
Here you go.
We voted through the 2 Roger Deakins movie, by the way, to the finale.
Yeah.
When it comes to cinematography, just as a.
So for me, yes, you could probably have guessed this, but I'm gonna go Blade Runner 2049.
Hey, it's been in your top 4 for a long time. I think it was like on the very left as well. As a Patreon on Letterboxd, it also was like your background thing for a while. Yeah, you've often said that it's your favorite film of all time, so that's no surprise. I'm actually just, I guess, most surprised how close Prisoners gets, because maybe when did Prisoners come out? Like 10 years ago? 2013?
2013.
Yeah. 11 years ago now. Jesus, time flies. I remember this being one of my favorite films of all time early on into movie watching. I was like 14, 15 when this movie came out. I can't do math, so don't check me on that. No, 15. And I immediately connected with it. I think like for a 15, 16-year-old watching this, you don't really have the nuance yet. You're just kind of seeing this thrilling aspect of a man just going after doing what it takes to get his kid back. And when you're older, you're kind of realizing, hold up, he's losing himself. He's not being productive overall. This is all just a destructive cycle that he enters. And the twists and turns that it takes of who's actually responsible and who isn't, and where the abuse also happens with the perpetrators and stuff like that, it's not like explicitly stated. So I feel like it's still within the Villeneuve universe, a movie that still relies very much on show don't tell. And I think he's probably, like, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think it's probably the best at doing that, at least on current day. I can't think of another filmmaker who's better at doing the show don't tell, let the images speak for themselves than Villeneuve. He really is one of the greatest, and Blade Runner 2049 is probably the best sequel ever made. That includes like Empire Strikes Back and all of those other films that you could put there, the Ray 2 and I'm missing out, Two Towers and the greatest of whatever. Even my much beloved Before Sunset is included in that. Okay, going out on a limb here, so I'm also gonna go with Blade Runner 2049 as our joint favorite Villeneuve film of all time. Thank you, Kev, for that. I'd love to steal that book from you. That's actually, I'm jealous that you got that. Okay, now he's just flexing on us with all the 4Ks and okay. The door opens and just Villeneuve comes out. But yeah, that's it. Kev, would you have gone with us here with Blade Runner over Prisoners as well?
Oh no, I would have gone Prisoners, as you can see.
Cool. We love the sarcasm over from Belgium, but if you want to hear more of our thoughts on, I guess, Villeneuve's most recent film, we do have a non-spoiler and a very much spoiler-filled review of
Which
it
I'm
out
not
on the
in.
channel. You gotta mention that each time. Yes, I feel like he's not happy about that. That he's not a.
I don't know. I just think it's a great.
I don't know. I can't tell. But thanks so much for helping us doing the tie break here, Kev, and Lachlan for catching up with a lot of these films. These bracket always take a ton of time when we could be watching new films to revisit them. So if you can, leave a like and subscribe. We do them every couple of months, and the podcast, fortunately, is weekly. So we do have a ton of content on the page, so leave us a like and consider subscribing, like I said. And if you're watching this on any of the podcatchers, then leave us a rating as well. It's much appreciated. Let us know what your favorite is. Do you share the same feelings that we do about Blade Runner? Or where do you rank your filmography? You can also drop your lists below. If you guys have them, I'll also put them in the description for Kev, Lachlan, and myself. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.